Will now come to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Boyd,
He's excused.
Alderwoman Howard,
Present.
Alderman Ornowitz,
Excused.
Alderwoman Hubbard,
Present.
Alderman Muhammad,
Here.
Alderwoman Boyd,
She's running late. I would say excused.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Here.
Chairman Vaccaro.
Present.
5 present, you have quorum.
Okay, so the first thing we got to get out of the way is the minutes from the October 18th meeting. If everybody's read them, I'll actually make a motion that we pass the minutes out from the October 18th meeting. Do you have a second on that?
Second.
We have a second. Has everybody read them? Then, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Boyd, Alderwoman Howard, Alderman Ornowitz, Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderman Muhammad,
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Chairman Vaccaro.
Aye.
5 aye votes.
Okay, Alderman Muhammad, you're welcome to go up there. I can tell you we are not going to be taking public testimony. John's going to introduce John has a committee substitute that he's going to talk to us about, and if John has someone he wants to speak on it, he'll bring them up. So if we're all in tune with that. I think John's going to bring you up, but I'm not sure. So, John, you want to go ahead and, first you want to introduce your committee substitute to Board Bill 94.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to introduce Board Bill 94, Committee Substitute.
Okay, and I'll second that. And do I hear anything from previous roll?
No objection.
Okay, there's no objection to the previous roll. So we're not going to vote on it because it's a different bill, and under our rules, we can't. But John, if you can go ahead and explain, and if anyone, the aldermen even sitting over in the corner, want to have questions or want to talk about it, certainly you're welcome to come sit up here with us. John, it's all your show.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Board Bill 94 is a simple bill. We have discussed this previously, and this has been a floating subject around the city for almost 2 years now. And it creates guidelines for the usage of surveillance technology in the city. If you guys remember, we passed a resolution last session under former Alderman Terry Kennedy, the distinguished gentleman from the 18th Ward, and we directed the Chief Technology Officer of the city, which was Robert Gaskins, to report back to the board on a variety of subjects, but mostly including surveillance technology, and submitting to us rules and regulations for the uses of this technology, and he has failed to do so. So what we did was, in collaboration with two community organizations, Privacy Watch and ACLU, we drafted this ordinance. This ordinance comes from various pieces of legislation around the country that has adopted and developed these best practices to protect and safeguard citizens. And
It's hard to hear you.
it's hard to hear
So
me?
you need to hold the mic up closer.
Oh, well, I'll start all over. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, it's a simple bill.
There you go.
And what it does is, again, it develops those safeguards for the rights of citizens here in the city of St. Louis in terms of surveillance usage and technology. And this would create an ordinance that we would use here in the city of St. Louis that will be adopted by various departments and agencies that use surveillance technology. And they will all be subject to the regulation of this ordinance in its usage. And I would like to invite up someone who has helped draft this legislation and who I've worked very closely with in getting this done, Sarah from ACLU. But the two differences in the legislation you see, is one has been developed with stronger content in legislative language, and it's a couple of changes just to the text of the bill and overall guidance of the bill that gives particular regulatory power to CREA, the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency, offset from the Director of Public Safety. Of course,
Can we get Sarah's name because I'll need it for the minutes. Sarah, if you could sign in, please. And who you're with, that way you end up in our minutes. I'm sorry, Jan, go ahead.
now, of course, our Director of Public Safety and our friends in the police department, they are not too keen on this idea, and I can understand why. But in terms of safeguarding citizens and protecting citizens from surveillance, in the proposal of technology that can be used, it is pivotal and crucial that we pass this type of legislation. And again, if you look at the committee substitute that I've introduced today, you will see the differential in this between the original bill. Everything is marked out for you so you can see it comprehensively and clearly. But this is all about safeguarding citizen rights. And again, we've been working on this for almost 2 years. The former alderman from the 18th did introduce this legislation, and in order to perfect it, he decided to hold on it, and I think we got a pretty perfect bill before us today. And Sarah could speak more to it as well. And again, various cities and counties more so have adopted this type of legislation around the country. We need to do the exact same thing. As our city and our community becomes more familiar with the usage of surveillance technology, as we keep installing surveillance cameras and these various forms of surveillance devices throughout the city, we have to protect citizens at all costs, and this is exactly what Board Bill 94 does. Sarah will speak from here, and I will entertain questions from the committee, if any shall arise.
Thank you, Alderman Collins Mohammed. My name is Sarah Baker. I'm the Policy Director with the American Civil Liberties Union of Missouri. As John mentioned, there are 3 changes in the substitute that you see before you. One is that we changed all of the roles that mentioned the Director of Public Safety to the Director of the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency. The second change was that all of the responsibilities that were assigned to the Director of Public Safety are now assigned to the Director of the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency. And we allow for additional community input and support in that process to facilitate the administrative burden, if there is any, going forward. And then 3, we made the cause of action that is included in the bill mirror the other city ordinances that included a cause of action, so it's the same process as it is for the Department of Civil Rights for the city. So those were the 3 changes we made. The bill is in essence a guideline, a framework to say you can use surveillance technology in the city of St. Louis, but it must come before the people. It needs to be something that's done in the open, and we need to decide as a community if we approve or we don't. And then as we move forward with that approval or disapproval, we need to be able to hold folks accountable to make sure it's used in a way that doesn't directly impact minority communities disproportionately, that upholds civil liberties, and best supports public safety. Because frankly, right now, we have no check on if the surveillance technology is actually getting the bang for our buck that we want in the city of St. Louis. As John mentioned, there are 12 other cities that have done it throughout the United States. There should be a letter in your packet from Brian Hofer, who's the chair of the City of Oakland's Privacy Advisory Commission. If it's not, I can get you a copy as well. I think it's that one with the sort of flame on the front of it right there. And Brian went through a couple of ways in which this has worked for Oakland and for 7 other ordinances throughout the state of California, in addition to the 11 other states where this has gotten forward. And he's found really that there's not a significant administrative burden, but relationships have improved between law enforcement and community members, and overall the ordinances have been quite successful in their implementation. So I just wanted to highlight that all for you so you have some background on where this has been working. And with that, I stand open to questions.
And these questions can be, Alderman Mohammed, if you could go up front. These questions could go either way. Alderwoman Howard, any questions for either one of the 2?
I have no questions.
Oh, okay. Well, that was easy. Alderwoman Tamika Hubbard.
So, do you have any, are there any incidents regarding this where you see that they violated someone's rights by way of the current use of technology or whatever for surveillance?
Yeah.
In this city?
Yeah, actually, in the city of St. Louis in April 2015, there were 2 cases thrown out in court because they had illegally used Stingray technology, which is a technology that scoops up cell phone data, and they had found that to be an illegal and immiscible search. And so if you had a process like this put forward that delineated how that technology was supposed to be used, you could avoid circumstances in which you're walking into an illegality.
And so tell me how that was used. So it was I don't even know the specifics of the case, but did they utilize access to someone's text messages
Yeah.
or?
So Stingray technology can scoop up a wide variety of information, including location information, including sometimes messages that have been sent, but they act as a dragnet. So instead of saying, I'm going to make sure that I'm pinpointing Alderman Hubbard's cell phone, it's going to get everyone's cell phone in this room, and really everyone's cell phone on this block. And so then if you are implicated in any sort of activity...
And who used that? Was it the St. Louis
So this
Police
was a
Department?
collaboration between the St. Louis City Police Department and I believe the FBI in this case. And because there was no agreed framework between them of are we using this technology or are we not, and what are the limitations we're putting on it, we expose our citizens to that dragnet sort
Was
of
this
technology.
a federal case?
The case was tried in the city of St. Louis. I don't know which court, though, so I can't answer that.
Do you know the name?
Let's see. It was reported in the Riverfront Times from April 2015. I can find you the citation that I have for this. I don't have it on this page, but it was pretty widely reported in April 2015.
Okay, and so there's been several incidents like.
Yeah.
So are you saying that basically we just need some type of policy?
Yeah, and I'm happy to get you this article. I'm sorry I didn't bring the full thing with me. But when it happens, right, when we use that dragnet sort of technology, where the rubber really hits the road is because we don't have any framework that says this is permissible and this isn't. We've kind of made a Wild West scenario where we're scooping up all this data. We have no regulations on how it's stored, how it's used, how long it's stored for. And then when you get into cases where there are prosecutions, you can have scooped up additional information from people that have no involvement with it at all. And so in cases like this, what you really should be doing is getting a warrant for a specific device instead of saying I'm going to use technology that's going to take in everyone's information.
Okay.
So the bill is just a basic framework. All it says is City of St. Louis should have a policy for how we're using surveillance technology. That policy should be approved by you all, shouldn't be done in secrecy. And then each program should be approved, again, in a public forum like this to say this is how we're going to use it.
Okay, thank you for your comments regarding that. I do know that in my community where we have some serious crime issues, we welcome surveillance.
Right.
I mean, it's not a situation where, oh, Big Brother is always watching us.
Right.
So we do not want to prohibit anything that would make us more safer as a community. So
Right.
where I can get the concerns, from the ACLU, and I do agree that we need to have some type of policy in place, how we store this data, all of that, the technical part of it. And it was a guy here last year that last month or whenever we heard this, and he spoke to that. Does anyone have an update on where the city is with coming up with this plan already, or?
Alderman Mohammed might be able to share that, but I just wanted to talk to your first point about cameras and the sort of Big Brother watching. I'm not sure if you were here last time when I talked about this, but my parents were actually the victims of a carjacking in the city of St. Louis. They have cameras around their house. They were offered the ability to plug those cameras into the real-time crime center or not. I individually and us as an organization don't take the position that you shouldn't be able to do that to ensure public safety, but it should be a choice. And there should be a policy for how that data is used. And so there's actually a specific amendment in the bill that talks about
Or what things in the public right away?
a choice for the individual, right? So for the citizen themselves. Like if my parents put up cameras at their house and the police use those without their consent, that would be problematic, right? But if my parents opt in to the real-time crime center, that's not problematic. They've said that's okay, you can watch our backyard or you can watch our alleyway or that sort of thing. And so in instances like this, what I'm saying is in the bill itself, we make an exception for cameras and augmenting the number of cameras that can be used in the neighborhood because we don't want there to be so much of an administrative burden. Once that program is approved, then it's approved and can move forward.
So you all, your organization in its capacity want to be able to determine how many cameras can be in a
No,
neighborhood?
I'm saying there's a specific amendment in the bill that makes that not a thing. So you
Okay.
were asking about cameras and the use of cameras in your community.
Okay.
The bill itself makes a wide exception for replacing like units of cameras and being able to use cameras. It's this more aggressive technology, like Stingray technology, for example, that would fall under the wider policy for the city. And the cameras, as far as the data that's being used from them, we'd want to make sure that the cameras that input into the Real-Time Crime Center has a policy and basically says not anyone and their brother can access this information, here's who can access it, here's how long it can be stored, those sorts of things. So it's not taking away anyone's ability to have surveillance technology, it's just bringing it into a public sphere.
Okay. No further questions.
Alderwoman Hubbard.
No problem.
I got a few comments, even though my name's on this too, but when you talk about cell phones, I know the police use that, like, but they have to look at how many cell phones, because I know that murders have been solved this way, because I always keep saying my son's on homicide, but if there's a phone at a specific place and they take all the phones from there, which they do, and then they start following one specific phone that may be going from here to there, they use that technology to solve murders.
There's nothing in this legislation that says that they would not be allowed to use that technology. All that's in this legislation is if you want to use Stingray technology to collect cell phone data and things like that, then it should be compliant with the policy of the city of St. Louis, which you all would help set. And then that technology should be approved, but it doesn't stop you from using the technology at all. And in instances like you're talking about with specific suspects in mind, the American judicial system has had this process for a long period of time. Get a warrant to go after that individual. It's not, any sort of additional burden that we're putting on an individual to get the policy approved under this ordinance. It's simply saying, here are the overarching regulations. You can use that technology if it's been beneficial to the community, but we're just going to have an approval process for what that looks like writ large, not for every individual. If you're going out there and saying, I today am pursuing Jack, who's been involved in this homicide, that policy would have already been approved by the city under an ordinance like this. It would fall under that broad umbrella, so you're not coming back here every time it's an individual instance you want to use surveillance technology. You're just having an overarching provision of this is how we use surveillance technology in the city of St. Louis. So it's not like I could use surveillance technology like a cell phone simulator to say, I'm going to track Jack, who was a homicide, perhaps a perpetrator of a homicide, and I'm going to track Jill, who happens to be my girlfriend, but I have access to the cell phone data on her.
Well, sometimes they have to track every cell phone that was at a specific spot.
Nothing here prohibits them from saying, we're going to use Stingray technology in this specific area. The only prohibition here is to say there's a general framework for how this is going to be used. So yes, it can be used to go after an active crime, right? No, it can't be used to hold on to for 2 years and go back through and identify where your loved one was at this particular point in time.
And
Mr. Chairman, just so I can just expound on it, this will not, as I know, our Director of Public Safety just walked in, and we have had several conversations on this bill in the Real-Time Crime Center numerous times. This bill does not prohibit the police from using surveillance technology to fight crime or to solve crimes or things of that sort. It only creates a system of checks and balances with the regulation of surveillance technology. Again, we have roughly, and our director can correct me if I'm wrong, but last time I checked, I believe we have roughly 700 surveillance cameras installed throughout the city of St. Louis, and we just want to make sure that we have a policy framework that regulates its usage, that regulates the departments and entities that utilizes this technology, just for the safeguard of residents. We want to make sure that we're not invading on anybody's private rights. Now, with the cameras that we have, they're very well capable of invading someone's private or personal rights and, accessing personal data. We just want to make sure that we have a safeguard in place, and that's what Board Bill 94 does. Again, and it's only creating, it's pretty much just creating an agenda for surveillance technology. Departments and entities that utilize this technology would report to the Board of Aldermen on this technology, its equipment, its purchases, things of that sort, just a general record keeping of its surveillance technology. And it also gives a task of forming an advisory committee that will help formulate policy framework for its usage. So it's not about making sure the police department cannot do its job in fighting crime. We all know we want to see a reduction in crime rate. I know I do in the 21st ward, and I'm sure every other alderman feels the same way. So it does not prohibit the police from doing their job. It's just about creating a policy framework in collaboration with various entities and departments that utilize surveillance technology.
And if I may add, the vote you're taking today is.
We're not taking one.
Well,
Okay, the
so,
vote you would-
sir, we can't take a vote today because Board Bill 94 is a committee substitute. So under our new policies adopted by the board, we're not allowed to take a vote because we introduced an entirely new bill. The only way for us to take a vote now would be to cut the bill up. Unfortunately, it'll be to cut the bill up and do amendments, which would not be, it'll be retroactive, not productive. So unfortunately, we cannot take a vote.
Well, regardless of that, regardless of, if you're approving the sub or not approving the sub, the only thing that the bill does is say, we're going to create a policy.
Right.
It doesn't say what that policy is. It lays out some guidelines for what should be included, but you're going to get another vote on what the policy looks like. So all these questions of minutia, you'll get another dig at that to say, this is what we want, this is what we don't want. But right now, you have no ability to actually do any sort of regulation.
No, I want to understand. I ask because I want other people to understand that. Oh, sure, absolutely.
What is your background in technology?
Well, in my non-ACLU capacity, I'm the founder of a tech company with my husband. In my ACLU capacity, I've done quite a bit of legislation both at the state level and in working with our federal counterparts about privacy technology and the use of, or privacy regulations and the use of surveillance.
I don't see it. Does everybody have a?
I guess my issue is that I think that as a city, we need to have something that we're all rowing in the same direction on. And putting it under CREA, to me, doesn't seem like an effective place to put it because they have no enforcement potential. So, I mean, there's a whole lot of flaws with this, but I won't go into all that. But I just was wondering, because I think we have a technology expert employed by the city, and I think we need to work with them as we move forward on this to make sure we dotted all our I's and crossed all our T's. Technology is an ever-changing landscape. I mean, we got Ring doorbells. There's a lot going on with the Ring doorbells. Who
Yeah.
gets that information? Who's allowed to it? Who has privy to it? Should we share it with the police, or is it ours only? If it's shared with the police, where are the boundaries for that?
Those are all excellent questions.
Yes, I know, and I mean, and it's ever evolving. I mean, when you think you've nailed something, it's like handling Jell-O. So I'm going to be honest, I don't know a whole lot about technology. I know how to fire this thing up and drive it, but that's about it. I don't know how it works. I don't know where it works. I don't know who can see what I've got on here. I guess maybe I should be more proactive. I'm not doing anything that I need to worry about that I think of. I don't know. But I guess I would like something that we all can agree on for the city, and that we have our public safety department in on, and that everybody's rowing in the same direction. Thank you. That's all.
Yeah. I think the point you're making about technology evolving is incredibly important. And right now where St. Louis is we're evolving without any sort of guidance. And so in a similar way that the airline industry evolved, we wouldn't have wanted to evolve without the FAA, right? So,
But we didn't have the FAA to be.
but we wouldn't want to be flying in those planes today if we didn't have any regulation or guidance on how that technology was used. Same in the city of St. Louis. We're getting to a point, I would argue that we've passed it, where we need to be involved in making actual decisions about our surveillance technology rather than allowing this to just happen to us.
And if
I
may-
agree on that, but I would like to say that we all need to work together on this and have a position that we can all agree on and feel comfortable that we have the best people representing the city and the public to craft this legislation.
Alderwoman, and I agree with you totally, and again, me and the Director of Public Safety have been back and forth communicating about this particularly, and and the reality is we would not be discussing this bill had the mayor's chief technology officer had he obeyed the law and come up with a real plan, technology usage plan, and introduce to the Board of Aldermen like he was supposed to. He did not do that. And I think that's something that we need to take up with.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
As I recall, I may be incorrect, as I recall, the last meeting, there was a timeline that he was going to come back to us with some.
Right, and he
And
still
have-
hasn't. So he was supposed to come
Have you
back.
checked with him?
I have. He
Okay.
was supposed to come back to the board in September of 2019.
Right,
with a
and he
plan.
was here
He failed to do it.
in
He asked
November.
for 30 more days.
And those 30 days have passed,
Yes.
and he hasn't.
No. He did reach out to me for a meeting. I have no reason to meet with him. The legislation is already drafted. I would love to work with the chief technology officer on this. However,
Well,
honestly,
you
he
don't want to
doesn't
meet with him, you're not going to work with him on it.
Well, now it's passed. It's passed, and
Okay.
so when he came to the last committee hearing opposing the bill, and he could have reached out to me any time before that and scheduled a meeting, and we could have worked together to figure this out. And also, I think it's important to know the chief technology officer currently does not have any authority over the policy implementation of surveillance technology in the city as it relates to the Real-Time Crime Center. That falls directly under the purview of the police commissioner and the director of public safety. So he's not even involved in that process of its data collection, of its record keeping, or its general departmental policy. So I have no clue why he would be even in objection to the board bill when it's not even under his purview. However, me and the director of public safety have talked about this board bill, and he does have some concerns, which I understand, but I also think that it's critical that we get some legislation on the table. Again, it's all about safeguarding citizens. Now,
I respect your concerns, however, I think that, prudence in having a bill here that is actually usable is much more important than going forward with something that may be not workable.
I agree 100%. And so the bill forms an advisory committee with CREA that would work with the director of public safety to form surveillance technology guidelines. This does not create
Is
guidelines.
Korea willing to undertake this? Have you talked to Mr. Bryson?
Well,
the director?
Hold on.
Let me ask Christine, you want to come up? She sits on CREA,
Oh.
she represents the Board of Aldermen.
I just want to say this real quick. And I understand working with departments and working with division heads, but I think it's important for us to know no one can dictate our legislative agenda nor policy making. We are the legislative body. We pass the policies, we pass the laws. Departments should enforce the laws that we pass. So we have communicated with CREA. He does understand he understands the importance of this legislation, and is he willing to undertake it? Yes, he is.
But does he have the ability to enforce it?
Well, this goes back to what we do here in the Board of Aldermen. I think if we don't pass policies that enable department heads to enforce the laws that we pass, then that falls back on us. He would, though. Again, under this legislation, it allows the city to create an agenda. This does not create the agenda. So we don't know what the guidelines will be. We don't know what that looks like. Under this legislation, they create the agenda, they come back to the Public Safety Committee, and then we go on from there. So does he have the resources to do it? I think if he has the common sense to appoint people who understand surveillance technology, then I would think so.
So what you're telling me is this actually does nothing? It just allows us to create a policy? It's a bill for a bill?
I disagree. It's
Well, I
not
mean,
a bill.
that's
No, no,
what I
absolutely.
understood you. I'm not saying it does, I understood you to say
No,
that.
absolutely.
Okay, so
It creates a surveillance technology usage plan
I want
and
to,
guidelines.
wanna move
That's
Okay.
what it
That's
does,
fine.
Alderman.
I'm done.
Yes.
you represent us on CREA. Do you have any comments?
Sure. So I want to state for the record, I'm supportive of this bill. I'm concerned about it going to CREA. I've been working with the office and our attorney kind of overall with respect to what CREA has currently under its purview and their inability to have, I think, adequate staffing and legal representation for what they already do. The ordinance that enables CREA to exist enforces housing and employment law. And there are a number of bills that we have been discussing lately about putting under CREA. And I think we need a legal opinion about whether or not we can keep adding to CREA under different topics than employment and housing. And I did touch base with Charles Bryson on this, and he is supportive, but does not have the capacity to take this on at this time outside of just establishing the advisory board, but not for the enforcement. And I think another note of concern is that while I appreciate Alderman Mohammed's efforts, I think that having CREA take this on without having their own attorney means that it really just falls back to the city councilor's office, which is overseen by the mayor's administration.
So I think what she's saying, because I sat on CREA, is they don't have their own attorney, so their attorney is going to do whatever they're told to do, and at least, I shouldn't say it that way, but their attorney is regulated by the mayor. And I ran into this before when I wanted to get CREA their own attorney, which Charles Bryson thought was a good idea, and then all of a sudden came up, because we put it in the budget for them to have one, and he came over and said, oh, we don't need one, which I disagree with, because again, if someone in this building feels their civil rights in any way been violated, the prosecution and the defense come from upstairs, the same office. I don't even see how that's possible. CREA should have its own attorney. Anyway, we should.
I'm sorry, just point of order, we can, the bill before us is 94, we can go back
I
and
understand.
we could
Yeah,
talk
we should be
about.
debating CREA. So I would just say, John, do you have more you want to add to this, and then otherwise we're going to move on?
I just want to say, we are following a model that other cities and counties around the country have adopted in regards to surveillance technology. This is not about stopping the police. This is not about government bureaucracy. This is about safeguarding citizens and their right to privacy. And that's what we're doing under this board bill, under this hopeful ordinance. I will work with any, and I've said this at the last committee hearing, I will work with any alderman and any mayoral staffer who wants to develop a comprehensive policy as it relates to surveillance technology, and that's all that we're doing. So I have no further comments, Mr. Chairman. Again, I know we cannot vote on the committee substitute since it was just introduced. To the committee, but I would encourage the committee to go and read the bill in its entirety and read its language in full completion, and also do some independent research on surveillance technology and similar legislation or similar policies that have been adopted around the country. We are behind the 8 ball, and again, this is about safeguarding people's rights, which they are entitled to, and we are not creating a policy. The committee will create the policy. The director of CREA will create the policy, and I'm confident he will work with the public safety director and the police to create the policy. Now, as we sit here and we talk about CREA being able to house this particular requirement, being able to perform this requirement, I think the bigger problem is if they cannot perform this requirement, then that should send a signal to us saying that we have a department who's in charge of civil rights and does not have the resources to do anything. That's a shame on us in the legislative body, because every budget year, we do not fund CREA, and we actually can. We come up with excuses. We come up with these allegorical statements that they're not important, when in fact CREA is important, because they are the civil rights arm of this city. So if we pass a bill, given the regulation to CREA and they can't enforce it, then we need to look ourselves in the mirror and say what the hell we're doing. No further questions,
I
Mr.
don't disagree.
Chairman.
So I think what we're going to do is, we're just setting this aside. Alderman Muhammad will let me know when he wants to have the next hearing. I can tell you, other than Tuesday next week, because I have doctor's appointments, I'm pretty open to whatever you want to do, or it could be whenever you let me know when you're ready, and generally what'll happen is he'll kind of talk to everybody. Obviously, he wouldn't want to bring it forward unless he has all the votes. I mean, at least I wouldn't.
Could I ask that we invite the mayor's technology director to come?
When we're here in the committee substitute, I would say just whatever whoever wants to bring in, at that point, Jimmy Edwards and whoever else wants to come in and talk. Today, it's just getting this in front of us, it's getting the conversation started. We're not voting on anything.
Okay.
So we're going to move on from that. Thank you so much for coming in. The other, and I'm just going to do it from here, my resolution, the basic firearms safety regulation, this was written because in the country, if you're going to go hunting, because they didn't want to see other hunters getting shot, they require a gun safety course. And what this does is simply ask the governor, who I've also sent a letter to asking him to come down and speak to us, but if he doesn't, then we'll go to him. All we're asking is they look at a policy in Jeff City similar to the one that's across the whole state about gun safety. We see where little kids get shot with guns that have been left on a table. People have been accidentally shooting themselves with guns. We don't let people go out and hunt because people were getting shot without a gun safety course. Doesn't regulate you. It just says that they need to do the same thing that they're doing for every kid. If you're born after, I think it was 1967, you can't go hunting and you can't bring a gun out in the woods unless you've gone through a gun safety course. And all it does is prevent someone from misusing a gun, hurting themselves or someone else. So I don't know unless someone has questions on it. It's just a very simple thing. It's just a resolution that we're going to send to the to the governor. We don't have the authority to put together, implement a law like that, but they do. And if they feel like the kids hunting in the middle of the woods and the hunters in the woods should be safe, then they should feel the same way about gun ownership in the city of St. Louis. If there's any questions, I'll take them. If there's none...
I don't have a question, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say thank you for introducing Resolution 116. I think that it's important that we establish firearm requirements at the state level. As we know, we need these type of legislation to create gun safety. So thank you for establishing this resolution. I know our Director of Public Safety has spoken with members of the St. Louis delegation in the Missouri legislature, and he has asked them to introduce legislation as it relates to gun safety and gun background checks and gun purchases and permitting as well with this open carry state that we have. So thank you for introducing this, and I see that I am a co-sponsor.
Yeah, I would think so, yes.
Thank you for this resolution, Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate that. And we've sent a letter to the governor asking him, although we haven't got any response, but if he doesn't come to us, we'll go to him. He's in the city enough. He seems to stop by the mayor's office. We're only about 2 doors down. He don't even have to take the elevator to get any closer to us. We'd love to have him come in. We're not going to beat him up, but I think that, beside the mayor, the governor should hear from this public safety group, because we get the most complaints from people in the neighborhoods. We're the closest to the neighborhoods. Aldermen are the closest to neighbors, and we know the individual needs of our neighborhood. So we've sent a letter, I'm hoping he shows up. Anyone else for questions? If not, I'll move to adjourn if we get a second on that. We get to go home. Yeah, I'll tell you what, yes, well, let's take a vote on 116, I'm sorry, we can do that.
Chairman, I make the motion to pass out resolution number 116 with a as recommendation.
Previous roll?
Previous roll.
No objection to previous roll, we'll send this resolution to the governor. I'll make sure the clerk does. Thank you. We're adjourned.